I demand that you vacate this table immediately, or I will have security escort you out of this restaurant." The words fell like a blade through the dining room of Maison Lafitte, the most exclusive restaurant in downtown Atlanta. Marcus Chen looked up from his menu. He was 42 years old, dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than some people's rent, but looked unremarkable in a room full of money. His hands were still, resting on the edge of the white linen tablecloth. A half-empty glass of still water sat beside his untouched bread plate. Around him, the room had gone quiet. Pastel chandeliers cast warm light across tables dressed in cream and gold. The low murmur of conversation had stopped mid-sentence. Talks paused halfway to mouths. Victoria Sterling stood over him. She was 61, impeccably dressed in a navy Chanel suit, her silver hair swept back, her pearl necklace catching the light. Her smile was the kind that had never needed to be warm, because money had always done the talking for her. "That table belongs to the Sterling family," she said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "We've dined here every Thursday for 18 years. Marcus blinked once, not in fear, in recognition, and he knew this moment. He had lived versions of it in boardrooms, private clubs, hotel lobbies, and charity galas across 3 continents. The same question, asked in 1,000 different ways. "How did you get here? I'll let you in." The restaurant manager, a thin Frenchman named Philippe Dubois, appeared beside Victoria. His hands were clasped. His face was apologetic, but not to Marcus. "Sir," Philippe said quietly, "there seems to have been a misunderstanding. This is Sterling's reservation was confirmed for this table." Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and removed his phone. I did not raise his voice, and he did not stand. He simply looked at Philippe and said, "My name is Marcus Chen. Booked this table 3 weeks ago. I have the confirmation email." Lopez's smile stiffened. He glanced at Victoria, then back at Marcus. The calculation was visible. A black man in a good suit, or a white woman with an 18-year history, and a last name that appeared on 3 buildings in this city. Victoria's voice dropped, but not enough. "Marcus, is it? I'm sure you're a very successful young man, but some traditions matter. This is my table. Everyone knows that." Woman at the next table lowered her wine glass. A man in a navy blazer stopped mid-sentence. Somewhere behind Marcus, a phone camera clicked on with a soft chirp. Marcus felt the old weight settle against his chest, the same weight he had carried since his first day as a junior analyst at a firm where the elevator operator had asked if he was delivering food. He did not answer with anger. Anger gave them what they wanted. It confirmed the story they had already written. So he sat taller. "I understand this is your tradition," Marcus said, his voice calm. "But I made a reservation. Not I confirmed it. I arrived on time. I will not leave because another guest prefers this table." Victoria's jaw tightened. Philippe's face reddened. A man at the bar, older, white, wearing a wedding ring and a worried expression, watched the scene unfold with growing unease. And Philippe leaned closer to Marcus. "Sir, we can offer you another table. Not bite at one. With our apologies." "Why?" The question was simple. It landed like a stone in still water. Philippe hesitated. Victoria's expression flickered. She was not used to being questioned, certainly not by a black man, in a restaurant where she had been treated like royalty for nearly 2 decades. Marcus's phone buzzed on the table. A preview flashed across the screen. Board meeting moved to 2 p.m. Chen Capital acquisition final documents ready for review. Philippe saw only a glimpse, not enough to understand. Victoria saw nothing at all. Neither of them knew the man they were trying to move was the founder and managing partner of Chen Capital Partners, a private equity firm that had just acquired the parent company of Maison Lafitte, as entire hospitality group. Neither knew he controlled a fund large enough to buy this restaurant 3 times over. Neither knew this table was not just a table. It was the first test of a new ownership. Philippe straightened his jacket. Then I will call the owner. Marcus picked up his water glass. Not by acknowledged due. Victor Kane arrived at the table with the kind of silence that powerful men learn when they have spent decades walking through rooms that belong to them. He was 58, tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than most cars. His face was unreadable, trained by years of boardroom negotiations and quiet acquisitions. He did not look at Marcus first. He looked at Victoria. "Victoria," he said, his voice smooth. "I heard there was an issue." Victoria's posture softened. Relief flickered across her face. "Victor, thank goodness. This gentleman seems to have been given our table. I'm sure it is a simple error." Victor turned to Marcus. His eyes moved over the charcoal suit, the quiet hands, the untouched water glass. He did not see a threat. He saw an inconvenience. "Sir," Victor said, "I'm Victor Kane. I own this restaurant. Mrs. Parson. Sterling is one of our most valued patrons. Not, I appreciate it if we could resolve this quickly and quietly." Marcus looked up at him. "I am Marcus Chen. I reserved this table. I confirmed it. Arrived on time. I have done nothing wrong." Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I understand that. But the Sterling family has been dining here for 18 years. There's a relationship there, not a tradition. Traditions can change," Marcus said. The words hung in the air. A server near the kitchen door froze. Woman at the next table stopped, pretending not to listen. Behind Marcus, the phone camera held steady. Victor's eyes narrowed. He was not used to being challenged in his own restaurant. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Mr. Then, I am trying to handle this with grace. But if you refuse to cooperate, I will have no choice but to ask you to leave." Marcus did not flinch. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that this is my establishment, and I am asking you to leave. And I am asking you to honor my reservation." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. Victoria smiled, small and satisfied. She had seen this before. Power always won. The black man in the good suit would leave, and she would have her table, and the world would continue to spin in the direction it always had. But Marcus did not stand. I reached into his jacket and removed a folded document. I placed it on the table, face up. It was a letter of acquisition, signed and sealed, confirming that Chen Capital Partners had completed the purchase of Sterling Hospitality Group, the parent company of Maison Lafitte, effective that morning. Victor's eyes dropped to the letter. His face went pale. Marcus spoke quietly. "I was hoping to enjoy a quiet dinner before Ness transition meeting. I wanted to see how the restaurant operated from the customer S perspective. Victor S' mouth opened. Nothing came out. Victoria leaned forward, confused. Not Victor. What is it? Victor did not answer. He was staring, and at the signature at the bottom of the letter. Marcus Chen. The man, who now owned everything Victor had spent 30 years building. The phone camera caught Victor S' face as it drained of color. It caught Victoria S' confusion turning to unease. It caught Philippe standing frozen, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Marcus folded the letter and returned it to his jacket. "I'm still hungry," he said. "Shall we continue?" Victor Kane did not move. His hands hung at his sides, fingers slightly curled, as if he had reached for something and found nothing. The letter was gone, back inside Marcus's jacket, but its weight remained in the air between them. Oft stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Mr. Kane, should I?" Victor raised one hand. The gesture was automatic, a reflex from decades of command. But his eyes had not left Marcus's face. Victoria S' composure cracked. "Victor, what is going on? Who is this man?" Victor S' throat moved. He looked at her, then back at Marcus, then at the letter that was no longer visible but had rewritten every assumption in the room. "Mr. Jen," Victor said, his voice lower now, stripped of its earlier authority. "I was not aware of the acquisition details. The transition was handled by corporate." Marcus nodded. "I know. That's why I came. I wanted to see the restaurant as it is, not as the spreadsheets describe it." A busboy near the kitchen entrance shifted his weight, unsure whether to continue clearing a nearby table. The woman with the wine glass had set it down completely. Her husband touched her wrist, but she did not look away. Victoria's voice rose. "Victor, I demand to know what is happening." Victor turned to her slowly. The man who had owned this room for 3 decades now looked older, smaller, as if the air had been let out of him. "Victoria, Mr. Chen is the new owner of Sterling Hospitality Group. He owns this restaurant now." The words landed like a physical blow. Victoria's face went through 3 distinct changes. First, disbelief. Then, recognition. Then something that looked almost like fear, quickly masked by indignation. "That's impossible," she said. "Our Sterling Hospitality has been in the Kane family for—" "Not anymore," Victor said. The silence that followed was deeper than before. It was not the silence of respect or anticipation. It was the silence of a room full of people realizing they had watched a mistake unfold in real time, and none of them had stopped it. Philippe's hands had gone to his sides. He looked at Marcus with new eyes, the kind of eyes that see a person clearly only after the world has told them to. Marcus picked up his water glass and took a slow sip. Set it down with the same deliberate calm. "Not like the duck confit," he said, "and a bottle of the 2015 Burgundy." Philippe blinked. "Knock in, sir. The duck confit. It has on the menu. Checked before I came." Philippe looked at Victor, who gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Philippe straightened his jacket and walked toward the kitchen with the slow, dazed steps of a man who had just survived a car accident. Victoria remained standing. Her hands were shaking now, though she tried to hide it by gripping her handbag. She looked at the empty chair across from Marcus, the chair that had been hers for 18 years. "Suppose I should leave," she said, her voice thin. Marcus looked up at her. "That would be appropriate." Turned and walked toward the door. What technology! Her heels struck the marble floor with less certainty than they had arrived with. A few patrons watched her go. Most looked down at their plates, unwilling to meet anyone's eyes. Victor stood alone beside the table, or cleared his throat. "Mr. Chen, I would like to apologize for—" "Sit down, Victor." Victor hesitated. Then he pulled out the chair Victoria had vacated and sat. Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about the kitchen." Victor Kane sat across from Marcus Chen in the chair that had belonged to Victoria Sterling for 18 years. The leather was still warm. Wine list lay untouched between them. Victor's hands rested on the tablecloth, fingers spread, as if he needed to feel something solid. "The kitchen," Victor said slowly. "What do you want to know?" Marcus did not answer immediately. He watched Victor's face, the way the older man's eyes kept drifting toward the jacket pocket where the letter had disappeared. "I want to know about the people," Marcus said. "The line cooks, the dishwashers, the servers who have been here longer than you have." Victor's brow furrowed. "I don't understand. You own a restaurant for 30 years. You must know their names." Victor looked down. The silence stretched. A server passed with a bottle of wine for a nearby table. The cork pulled with a soft pop that seemed too loud in the quiet room. "I know some of them," Victor admitted. "Once." Victor's jaw tightened. "I was not used to being questioned like this, not in his own restaurant, not by a man half his age. But the letter was real. The acquisition was real. And the man across from him was now the one who held the pen. The head chef," Victor said, "Jean Pierre. Jesus been with us for 12 years. And the dishwashers." Victor's mouth opened, then closed. He did not know. Marcus nodded lowly. "I spent 6 years washing dishes in a restaurant in Chicago. My mother worked double shifts at a hospital, worked nights. The head chef never knew my name, but he knew when I was 3 minutes late." Victor said nothing. "Made by technology. I came here tonight because I wanted to see if this restaurant was worth saving. Not the building, not by the brand, the culture." The word hung between them. T. Peter culture, the thing that could not be acquired in a merger or polished in a boardroom. The thing that either existed in the bones of a place or did not. "Victoria Sterling has been dining here for 18 years, Marcus said. "She believes she owns this table. She believes she owns this room. Believed that her presence here, privilege, she grants to everyone else." Victor's hands tightened on the tablecloth. "She was wrong," Marcus said. "But she did not become wrong on her own. She became wrong because this restaurant taught her she was right." The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Victor's face went through a series of small movements, tightening around the eyes, a slight parting of the lips, nor a swallow. "You re-saying this is my fault," Victor said. "I am saying you built a system that made tonight possible. The question is whether you want to build a different one." Victor looked away. His reflection stared back from the darkened window, older than he remembered, smaller than he had felt this morning. Behind them, the kitchen door swung open. Philip emerged carrying a plate. The duck confit, golden skin, steam rising, the smell of herbs and butter drifting across the table. Philippe set the plate in front of Marcus with trembling hands. "Your duck, mister. How's Chen? And the burgundy will be along shortly." Marcus looked at the plate. Then he looked at Victor. "Join me," Marcus said. "Not," Victor blinked. "What?" "Meet with me. Not me about the dishwashers. Not technology. Tell me about the servers who have been here longer than you have. No technology. Tell me about the culture you built, the one you didn't know you were building until tonight." Victor stared at him. For a long moment, he did not move. Then, slowly, he signaled to a passing server. "Bring me the same." The server nodded and disappeared. Marcus picked up his fork, got a small piece of duck, and raised it to his mouth. The flavor was rich, perfectly balanced, the kind of cooking that came from years of dedication. "This is good," Marcus said. Victor nodded. "Jean-Pierre is the best in the city. Then he should know his name is safe." Victor's eyes met Marcus's. Something shifted in the older man's face. Not relief, not gratitude. Something closer to recognition. Uncomfortable recognition of being seen. The burgundy arrived. 2 glasses. The server poured with steady hands. Marcus raised his glass. "To new beginnings." Victor hesitated. Then he lifted his own glass. The crystal chimed softly as they touched. Victor set his glass down. The wine trembled slightly at the rim, the only sign of his unease. He looked at the duck confit cooling on his plate, then back at Marcus. "You said you wanted to know if this restaurant was worth saving," Victor said. "What did you decide?" Marcus took another bite. He chewed slowly, deliberately, letting the question settle. Around them, the dining room had returned to a low hum of conversation. But the energy had changed. People spoke in softer tones. Eyes drifted toward their table and away again. "Decided it depends on you." Victor's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "No, on me. Not by technology. On whether you can see what happened tonight as a symptom, not an accident." Victor set the fork down. The duck remained untouched. He looked at the tablecloth, at the wine glass, at his own hands. Not my. They were the hands of a man who had built something, but also the hands of a man who had looked away. "Not about Victoria," Victor said quietly. "I knew she treated people a certain way. I told myself she was a good customer, not technology. That keeping her happy was good for business." Marcus said nothing. I told myself that the servers could handle it, that it was part of the job, that rich people were difficult everywhere. Victor's voice dropped. Told myself a lot of things. A server passed, clearing plates from a nearby table. Victor watched her move, the economy of her motion, the way she balanced 3 plates on one arm without looking. I'd seen her do that 1,000 times. I'd never asked her name. "He's been here 8 years, Victor said. "Her name is Maria. Has 2 children. Her husband works nights at a warehouse." Marcus nodded. "That's a start." Dubar looked at him. "You not going to fire me?" Not going to fire you tonight." The answer was honest. It landed with the weight of a door left slightly open. Victor picked up his fork again. I cut a piece of duck and ate it. The flavor filled his mouth, but he barely tasted it. He was thinking about Maria, about the dishwashers he did not know. About 18 years of Thursday dinners and the assumptions they had built. Don't know how to fix it, Victor admitted. Marcus leaned back. The leather of his chair creaked softly. You start by listening. Then you start by changing what you reward. Then you start by making sure that what happened tonight never happens again. Not in any version, not to anyone. And if I can tea, then this restaurant will fail. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Not by eventually. Because cultures that protect comfort over dignity always collapse. They just take longer to die. Victor set his fork down again. He had lost his appetite. Marcus picked up his wine glass. But I think you can. I think you know you can. That's why you still sitting here. Victor looked at him. Not first time dying. Something like hope flickered in his eyes. Not small, not fragile, but real. I'll start tomorrow, Victor said. No, Marcus said. You'll start tonight. Maria is still on the clock. Go ask her how her children are doing. Victor stared at him. Then slowly he pushed his chair back and stood. Straightened his jacket. He looked at Marcus one last time. Thank you, he said. Marcus did not reply. Simply raised his glass. Victor walked toward the kitchen. His steps were uncertain at first, then steadier. Technology. He pushed through the swinging door and disappeared into the light. Marcus sat alone at the table. The duck confit was half eaten. The burgundy breathed in its decanter. Around him, the restaurant continued its quiet hum. Unaware that something fundamental had shifted, picked up his phone. Message from his assistant glowed on the screen. Board meeting confirmed for 9 a.m. Transition team ready. Marcus typed back. Delay it. I need another day. What technology? He set the phone down and looked at the empty chair across from him. 18 years of Thursday dinners had ended tonight. Something else was beginning. I did not know what it would become, but he knew it would start with a name. The kitchen doors swung behind Victor Kane. The sound of metal and steam and urgent voices spilled out briefly, then faded as the doors settled. Marcus sat alone, the half-empty wine glass before him, the duck confit growing cold on the plate. A server approached, young, nervous, her hands clasped. Technology. Chen. Can I bring you anything else? Marcus looked up. What's your name? She blinked, surprised. Diana. How long have you worked here? Diana. By 2 years. Almost 3. Do you like it? She hesitated. The hesitation told him everything. It's a good job, she said carefully. Marcus nodded. Understood the careful answer. The answer that protected the speaker more than it described the truth. He had given that answer himself many times, in many rooms. The duck was excellent, he said. Please tell the chef. Diana nodded and retreated. Marcus watched her go. He watched the way she moved through the room, efficient, invisible. The way servers learn to move when they have learned that visibility is a risk. Phone buzzed again. Different message this time. His daughter, age 12. Dad, did you eat yet? How? He smiled. Small thing. Private. Not typed back. Almost done. How was homework? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. More boring. Miss you. Stared at the screen longer than the words required. Then he put the phone away. The restaurant was thinning now. The late crowd had begun to leave, replaced by the quieter energy of tables being reset for tomorrow. Technology. A busboy moved through the room with a tray of rolled napkins, placing them with mechanical precision. Marcus watched him. Young, maybe 19. Dark skin. Not focused eyes. The same age Marcus had been when he washed dishes in Chicago, when the head chef did not know his name, but knew exactly when he was late. The busboy glanced up and caught Marcus looking. Froze, uncertain. Marcus nodded at him. Just once. A small acknowledgement. The busboy nodded back, uncertain. Then he continued his work. The kitchen door swung open again. Victor emerged, walking slowly. His face was different now, softer. Approached the table and stood beside it, not sitting. Maria's youngest son has a fever, Victor said. She was worried, but didn't want to ask for the night off. Marcus waited. I sent her home, paid her for the full shift. Victor sat down heavily. He looked at the cold duck on his plate, then at Marcus. Not been coming to this restaurant for 30 years. I thought I knew everything about it. You knew the parts that were comfortable. Victor let out a long breath. Yes, not by technology I know the parts that were comfortable. The silence between them was different now. Less guarded, more honest. Victor picked up his wine glass, though it was empty. He set it down again. What happens tomorrow? Marcus leaned forward. Tomorrow we meet with the full staff, every single person, and we tell them what tonight taught us. What did tonight teach us? Marcus looked at him steadily. That the most expensive thing in this restaurant was never the wine list. Estimation. It was the assumption that some people belong here more than others. Victor held his gaze. Then, slowly, he nodded. No, I think I understand. Marcus stood. He placed his napkin on the table. I hope so, Victor. Because I'm not buying restaurants to close them. I'm buying them to change them. He picked up his phone and slid it into his jacket pocket. I'll see you at 9 tomorrow. Bring the staff list. Every name. Victor's stood as well. Every name. Marcus walked toward the exit. The restaurant had grown quiet now. The last few tables finishing their meals. Diana was stacking menus near the host stand. Looked up as he passed. Good night, Mr. Chen. Bai paused. Good night, Diana. Stepped out into the Atlanta night. The air was cool, carrying the smell of rain that had not yet fallen. Streetlights cast long shadows across the empty sidewalk. His phone buzzed one last time. His daughter. Dad, are you coming home tonight? He typed back. Yes, I'll be there in an hour. Good. I made cookies. They were not great, but I tried. He smiled again, the same small private smile. They be perfect. Or put the phone away and walked toward his car. Behind him, Maison Lafitte glowed through its tall windows, warm and golden and full of people who had just begun to learn that change did not arrive with a memo or a merger. It arrived at a table for two, with a glass of Burgundy, and a question that no one had been brave enough to ask. The next morning arrived gray and humid, the kind of Atlanta morning that promised afternoon thunderstorms. Marcus stood at the window of his hotel suite, watching the city stir awake below. Coffee steamed on the table behind him. His phone showed 3 missed calls and a text from Victor Kane. Staff assembled. 9 a.m. Main dining room. Marcus dressed in a dark suit, no tie. He wanted to be approachable, not intimidating, or wanted them to see a man, not a title. When he arrived at Maison Lafitte, the staff was gathered in the main dining room, 47 people. Servers, cooks, dishwashers, bartenders, hosts, bussers. Some stood, sat at the tables where they usually served. Few looked afraid. Most looked tired. Victor stood at the front, his hands clasped. He looked older than he had last night, as if the weight of 30 years had settled on him all at once. "Thank you for coming," Victor began. "I know this is unusual, but we have a new owner, and he asked to speak with all of you." Murmurs rippled through the room. Eyes turned toward Marcus. He stepped forward. He did not stand behind the host stand or on a raised platform. He stood on the same floor as everyone else. "My name is Marcus Chen," he said, "and I was here last night." A few staff members exchanged glances. The busboy from the night before recognized him and straightened. "I came as a customer. I ordered duck confit and a bottle of Burgundy. But before I ordered, I watched. The room went still. I watched a woman demand my table, because she believed she had more right to it than I did. I watched the manager ask me to leave, not want her. I watched the owner arrive to support her, not because the reservation system was wrong, but because tradition mattered more than fairness." No one spoke. A dishwasher near the back wiped his hands on his apron and listened. "Last night was not an accident," Marcus continued. "What? It was the result of a culture that had learned to protect comfort over dignity. That is not your fault, but it is your problem now, because I am not here to punish anyone. I am here to change the way this restaurant works." Diana, the server from last night, looked down at her hands. Not by continued. "Every person in this room will receive a raise. Every person will have access to paid sick leave. Every person will be trained in conflict resolution, not just service standards. And every person will be treated with the same respect we expect them to show our guests." A cook near the kitchen door let out a breath he had been holding for years. "Starting today," Marcus said, "this restaurant belongs to all of you, not just the people who can afford to eat here, the people who make it possible." Victor stared at him. Not eyes were wet. Marcus looked across the room. "Now, I'd like to meet every single one of you, starting with the dishwashers." The dishwasher stepped forward. His name was Elijah. He had been working at Maison Lafitte for 4 years, washing plates through dinner service, through holiday rushes, through Thursday nights, when Victoria Sterling sat at table 7 and never looked at him. He was 27 years old. He had a daughter named Alia, who drew pictures of chefs on napkins and dreamed of owning a restaurant someday. Marcus shook his hand. "Thank you for staying, Elijah." Elijah nodded. Voice was rough when he spoke. "I almost quit last night. I know. I didn't think anyone would notice." Marcus looked at him. "No, I noticed. And I'm going to make sure everyone in this room notices from now on." One by one, the staff came forward. Diana, who had served Marcus his wine. The busboy, whose name was Thomas. The line cooks. The prep cooks. The bartender who had been mixing drinks at Maison Lafitte for 11 years and had never been invited to a staff meeting before. By the time the last hand was shaken, the morning had become afternoon. Thunder rumbled outside. Rain began to fall against the tall windows of the dining room. Marcus stood at the center of the room. At the center of the room, surrounded by people who had started the day, afraid, and were now looking at him with something he recognized. Not gratitude. Hope. Victor approached him. Not know how to thank you. Marcus shook his head. Don, thank me. Not change it. Make sure the next person who walks through that door does to have to prove they belong. Not, Victor nodded. I will. Marcus walked toward the exit. The rain was falling harder now, drumming against the glass. I paused at the door and turned back. The staff was still standing there, watching him. Elijah was holding a napkin with a crayon drawing on it. A small restaurant with a big door, and a sign that said, "Everyone welcome." Marcus smiled. Then he stepped out into the rain. 3 months later, Maison Lafitte was different. Not perfect, but different. The Thursday night tradition continued. But Victoria Sterling never returned. A new table sat in the center of the room, reserved every evening for staff members to eat together before service. Elijah was training to become a sous chef. Diana had become the new head server. Victor Kane had learned every name in the building. And Marcus Chen. He never asked for a statue, and never asked for praise. He signed the papers and moved on to the next restaurant, the next city, the next chance to remind people that dignity was not a luxury item. It was our birthright. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe for more powerful stories about courage, accountability, and justice. And in the comments, write these 3 words: respect changes everything.